And Charmy will begin.
All right, some students will need to start from the beginning with letters and sounds. Most ESL students will already be able to read in their language and have had some practice reading English, but there are some who come to our classes who do not have any experience with reading, even in their own language. We will show you some specific teaching techniques to use with students who need help with alphabetics and word study. And here's the tree. You've seen this before. Why is alphabetics important? Alphabetics is at the root of this tree because it includes the reading skills needed to decode words. The words used in a language are the vocabulary. Reading fluency is the ability to read words quickly, accurately, and with expression. And comprehension is, of course, the ability to understand. Right now, we'll work on teaching alphabetics. There will be a big difference between teaching alphabetics to basic literacy students and to ESL students. With a basic student, you'll be able to speak in your normal conversational English because they will understand what you're saying. It will be easy for them to understand that you are asking them to identify the sounds at the beginning or the end of a word, for example. An ESL student who is just learning the alphabet may have any level of English comprehension. When you're trying to isolate the sounds in the word cat, for example, they may or may not know what you mean by word, or beginning, or cat. Be aware of how well the ESL student is understanding your directions and keep everything as simple and as clear as you can.
So I'm curious whether other people have discovered this in themselves. As I'm clicking to change the slides tonight, I realize that when I'm talking, when I'm presenting, instead of, since I know you're not looking at me, I'm not making lots of gestures, but my finger gets really excited and it clicks on the mouse. And then I go, whoops, no, wasn't ready to change the slide yet. Anyway, my apologies, but I just realized that was what was happening. Okay, so, and that gave you time to look at and conceivably be slightly freaked out by this list of terms. We all use a collection of techniques to decode written words. This list goes from the smallest part of the word, which is a phoneme, we'll talk about that in a minute, to using neighboring words to figure out the meaning of the sentence, in other words, or of a word, in other words, context. So you can find this information in the materials we provided for you. The terminology you see here is not important at all, but it's the concepts that are. So let's discuss phonemic awareness first. A phoneme is the smallest individual sound in an oral language. English has more than 40 sounds. Phonemic awareness is the ability to hear and speak those individual sounds. If you can't do that, you can't figure out how to decode a word by the letters that it contains. For example, can your student hear the 3 sounds in cat? K, a, t. Can the student hear the individual sounds? And then it gets more complicated because English is weird. How about cash? K, a, sh. Now that word has 4 letters, but it still only has 3 phonemes because sh makes a single sound. Phonics is the relationship between the sounds of the spoken language and the written symbols that represent the word, so that when the student sees CAT, the student understands that the CAT is cat. A word pattern or a word family is a spelling pattern that we can use easily to recognize new words. So, for example, the at family, the -at family can be cat, hat, mat, and so forth. And once a student can read one of those words, the other words become much easier to recognize. Do you remember what prefixes and suffixes are? If you do, real quick, enter one of each in the chat box. And then somebody else will have to tell me what they say, because I can't see the chat box while I have the present slide up. So write a prefix if you remember what it is, and write a suffix.
Ooh, we're getting sub, in, prefix has a pre.
Okay.
Sub, est, ly, proun.
Okay. Suffixes are the pieces of word that come at the end of the word. So word parts such as these prefixes and suffixes and syllables within the word and root words can be used to sound out longer words. Is this giving you flashbacks to 5th grade English class? And if so, are they happy memories or horrid ones? Sight words. Sight words are simply the words a person recognizes by sight. We want students to eventually recognize many words by sight, but very early beginning sight words might be the or was. Those are words that you can't quite actually sound out, and also that show up all the time. So you just need to know what they are. Decoding just means using various techniques to figure out the words you don't recognize when you're reading. It's important for students to be able to sound out new words and then make them sight words if they can. So reading the text around an unfamiliar word provides context clues to help figure out the words if the other techniques aren't working. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Oh yeah, I have this problem if I've talked too long. Oh gee, and now it's going to go too far ahead. Okay, sorry. All right. Who needs instruction in alphabetics? As you might expect, certainly non-readers and beginning readers will definitely need this kind of instruction. And they could be either basic literacy or ESL students. Also, tutors working with intermediate readers, those who might be reading at a 4th to 6th grade level, may find that as they go along that those students have gaps in their ability to decode words. Because of these gaps, they may rely heavily on context and familiarity with the topic, which is something adults get really good at doing, but sometimes it covers up the fact that they can't decode the words phonetically. Here's some things to help spot whether your student has gaps. Has their reading progress plateaued or leveled off? Are they able to recognize a word in some contexts but not in others? This might be because they are placing over-reliance on context rather than decoding. When they try to decode an unfamiliar word, do they have trouble getting reasonably close? If any of these things happen frequently for your student, you can try activities that develop alphabetics and word study skills to see whether they help. There are many published materials that focus on alphabetics instruction. The activities and teaching techniques that we cover in the next few slides can be used in addition to textbooks and workbooks, and whatever book or series you're using with your student will almost certainly have some advice about how to teach this.
Teaching phonics. For a non-reader or a beginning reader, students who need more extensive phonics instruction, a systematic approach works well. Several of our book series give students a complete collection of phonics skills. You might want to use the process you see on this slide, in which the student has a keyword to help them remember how to pronounce a given letter. You can record the words and the sounds of the letters for your student to see and listen to on their phone, the same way that we recorded berry and very earlier. You can, of course, record sentences and whole passages, as well as share videos on WhatsApp. For students who need very little phonics instruction, you can teach the phonics elements or principles that they do not know when they come up in a lesson, using words from the lesson. These tips and more are on the Teaching Phonics handout. All right, for this activity, please answer as if you were a student in a class following my directions. We need a student volunteer. Wait. All right. Do we have a volunteer who will be our student, please? I can't see anybody. Patty, Connor, you have that beautiful background. Do you want to be volunteered?
Happy to.
I want to go wherever it is you are right now.
It's Germany.
Okay. All right, wait a minute now. In order to, there we go. Oh, I messed up my whole Zoom when I was trying to see everybody, and then the slide went away. Oh, it's so high tech here. Okay. All right. So let's say, all right, you're the student, Miss Pat. Yeah. Okay. This is the letter M. What is this name of this letter?
M.
Okay. All right. Well, the whole screen went fluey. Okay. This word, oh, there's the word. This word begins with the sound made by the letter M. What is the sound for M? Good. Now listen for the sound as I read each word. Please read each word after me. Man.
Man.
Me.
Me.
Milk.
Milk.
Very good. And notice I use the phrase read the word, and I didn't say the word, to emphasize that my student is reading. Now, which of these words would help you remember the sound M? And then if the student would choose, like man, maybe, for example. If the student can't understand, choose a word for them. And it's helpful for students to have one word, a keyword, to use as a model for each sound that they can use in any activity. And then what are some other examples of other words that begin with the sound M? Right, so the student, where's my student? What are some examples of other words that begin with that sound M?
Monkey.
I like it. Right. Okay. All right. Now we've got the capital M there. Mexico, Maria, and Maryland are all the names of things, and so they begin with a capital M. A capital M and a lowercase m make the same sound. And notice, wait, where's my Catherine?
Oops, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Notice that we picked words that the student, it happened that when we were making this slide, my student's name is Maria, and so of course she knows her capital M. And of course she probably knows how to spell or see Maryland and Mexico. So, words that you think the student might have come across. All right, and for this activity, use simple words that the student's probably already familiar with. Thank you, volunteer.
Okay, could I have another volunteer? And since I can't really see you, is anybody, if someone will unmute him or herself and say, yes, me, then we'll continue.
Yes, me.
Okay, and who is me? Because I can't really see you.
This is Anna.
Oh, you're Anna. Okay, great. My daughter's name is Anna. I obviously think it's a wonderful name. So this chart, or this slide, shows the first chart in the Laubach Way to Reading series, which is a venerable series that has been used for millions of people. Oops, see, I was excited, who didn't know how to read yet. It's really good for beginners. It demonstrates also to you all that you can sit down, should you be assigned a student who doesn't speak a word of English and you don't speak a word of, Han Chinese, doesn't matter, you can communicate with them enough to get them started and teach them. But note also that many of the teaching principles that we're about to go over are important in teaching higher level students as well. How to ask questions, the importance of being consistent, importance of praising your student, which we've already talked about, and so on. So this is how the teaching chart goes. I'm using my cursor, And this is a bird with a long tail. Anna, say bird.
Bird.
Good. This looks like a bird with a long tail and a round body. Say bird.
Bird.
This is the word bird. Read bird.
Bird.
Good. Bird begins with the sound b. B. Say b.
B.
Again.
B.
Again.
B.
Good. The sound of this letter is b. The name of this letter is B. Say B.
B.
Good. Again.
B.
What is the sound of this letter?
B.
Good. What is the name of this letter?
B.
Very good. And you can see how the whole series gives the student a visual image of the letter that they're looking at. Notice also that we are moving consistently from left to right. If you're in person, you always move your finger to left to right. If you're working online with your student on their phone, use the cursor always to guide the student from left to right. For online teaching, you could hold this text up to the, I don't know if you can see me, to the computer and use your finger to follow along, but of course that makes it go from right to left on your computer. So better perhaps would be to take a screenshot of this page and guide the student through it with your cursor. On a phone, the image might be too small if your student is using a phone. So whatever you choose to do, if you were to teach using this technique, check it out in advance and look at it on your phone and see whether the image is too small. And if you want to do this and you can't figure out a good way to do it online because you're not meeting with your student in person yet, just talk to your coordinator. I mean, in this as in all else, your coordinator will be the person you can go to. But remember from this that pictures are a good memory device. We just talked about words like, you know, mom or milk being or man being a good memory device for attaching the beginning sound of a word to a letter. Images like this are also a really good memory device. If you're using Laubach, your student will have a copy of the book so they can follow along. This approach is multisensory, which is something we'll be talking about more. Your student sees, hears, says, and later writes something. Using multisensory teaching can help your student understand and retain. Also, it's important to make the connection for your student that each letter has both a name and a sound, and they are not the same thing. There are a lot of students who know the alphabet. You know, maybe a basic literacy student can sing the ABC song, but they've never really comprehended that each letter is attached to a sound, or in some cases, various sounds, and that they can decode a word by using the sounds of the letters that you're teaching them. Also, I said read the word bird instead of say the word, because it's always good to let your student realize that they are reading. It's a real incentive. You know, they realize, oh my gosh, I just read that word. So that's really good. Also ask direct questions. What is the name of this letter, or what is the sound of this letter, rather than saying the name of this letter is, the sound of this letter is, because that way, if your student's having to fill in the blank in the conversation you're having together, then the student has to do like extra brain work. So ask a direct question. What is the name of this letter? And then they will understand much more clearly what it is you want for them. Be consistent and use the same words to elicit a response when you're doing an exercise, and as few words as possible. so your student doesn't have to keep figuring out what you're saying, and they can concentrate on their response instead, especially important for an ESL student. And if your student makes a mistake, go back to the known. For example, if your student gets here and they can't remember the sound of the letter, go back to the long tail and the round body, and this is a bird, bird. In the beginning, it's a good idea, and these are the kinds of things that are true for all students, even much more advanced ones. In the very beginning, when you're meeting with your student, you'll want to start just a little bit lower than you think the student's real level is, and this is, again, is something your coordinator will help you discern. Because if you start just a bit lower than you think the student, really could, it's review for the student if you're right and they do know it already, and it gives them confidence. You can do this. Look what you already know. And then just another reminder, please, as we said in the pronunciation session, please, when you're modeling the sounds of letters to your students, don't say ba, say b, 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 not ba. Otherwise your student will just be confused. Okay, this is another series. This one is the Voyager series, and it's just a different way of doing something similar. This might be for a slightly higher level, but still kind of early student, or for somebody who just catches on really quickly. For a true non-reader, the Laubach method is probably better, probably more useful for them. But again, your coordinator will help you figure this out. This example isn't as structured. It teaches more in one lesson. It emphasizes writing, and it's more learner driven. But after you introduce the small b and the capital B at the top, your student identifies things in the picture that begin with B. So there's ball, bag, books, baby, and so forth. When your student identifies things in the picture that begin with the letter B, you write down the words, you read them, you ask your student to read them, and then you ask your student to write them. And again, here your student can choose a keyword to help remember the letter and its sound. So this is very much like what we just looked at.
A handout called Alphabetics Practice Activities has step-by-step instructions for how to do 12 activities with ideas for mixing them up. We'll describe several of them here. If you're using published materials, each lesson will probably have several worksheet activities for phonics practice. Remember that our coordinators will help you find these materials, but here are some engaging activities. Word find. Pick a short passage that is interesting to your student. Read the whole thing or just a paragraph, and then choose a sound and have your student search the article for words with that sound at the beginning, middle, or end of the word. Or the student could search for a particular sight word like the or is. Same or different. Select two sounds to work on like and t, and write them along with a keyword on cards and review them with the student. Then say two words and ask your student whether they begin with the same or different sounds. Mask, mother, tree, turn, mouth, top. This is like the minimal pairs that we discussed in the pronunciation section. And sound boxes. Here, you show a picture and make boxes or just lines where your student can fill in the letters that make up each sound in the word. The number of sounds may be different from the number of letters. For example, tooth has 5 letters, but only 3 sounds. And I can hear you screaming from your Zoom to my ears. How am I going to do that if I don't have the student sitting across from me? Well, help is here. Can I share my screen, please?
Yes.
Right. All right. I just found out about this. Maybe some of you already know this. There's this wonderful thing here called Jamboard.
Charmy loves Jamboard.
I love Jamboard. I love learning chocolate. I love chocolate. And I love Jamboard. Okay. Let me just share Jamboard with you. It's very simple. Now, do you see the Jamboard?
Yeah.
Oh, usually there's a green line around it. Okay. All right. Can you see where I'm going over to my my letter C over here? You see my
Yep.
cursor? Okay. So I'm in, if you're in Google, just regular old Google, the way do you get to your Jamboard? It's already built in your Jamboard. You go, this is how you would go to Google Drive or Google Docs, and you'd go down and there's this little guy here, which you can move him, called Jamboard. It's built in. It's in every Google account. All right, so you click on Jamboard. Then this is a very simple little thing. It's not complicated at all. And I've got 2 jams here, they're called, which is a cool name. Come on, cat. My cat's coming. All right, so I'm working on Alphabetics and we're doing the at sound, and I've got a picture and I've got the word cat, and then here I now have my little index cards to make other words that are spelled with an at. So basically, just to show you quickly how it works, this is everything here is all there is to it. There's a text box over here. You can do some shapes over here. You can find pictures. That's where I found the cat. And then sticky notes. So this sticky note is what I do to move it around, to move words around. It's very easy. And then there's something to erase there, and there's a pen for writing. So I made that one. Now I have a little deck of cards up here at the top. These are like little cards. And now this is like what you saw with the sun, except now the student is going to drag. And this is very easy. Once you see how it works, it's very easy to put it together. And so there, that's that. And then if you're doing open and closed sounds, we and wet and me and met, mad and made. Okay, then, all right. Okay, all right. So that's that. It's kind of self-explanatory once you open them. It's one more thing. I'm going to do this really fast. This isn't exactly Alphabetics, but you have to see this because it's so cool. Come on. You can use, of course, this is like a little whiteboard now. You can use this for vocabulary, and I just made a little quick one. So say you're doing vocabulary and you want them to put antonyms here. And then I did another one with unscramble a sentence. So the student will have to make it into a sentence for grammar. So, but you could do whatever you wanted with that. All right, that's the Jamboard advertisement for Jamboard.
But how does the student use it?
Oh, very good question. That is such a good question.
Yeah, Jeremy, there's another question about you and the student looking at the same time.
Yes. Okay. This is now on your shared Google. If the student, this is automatically on a Google, but on a phone you've got to download it as an app. But it's the same. It has a little bit tweaking. You know, you have to hold it a certain way, and you know, I think the little tools are at the bottom, and you have to play with it a little bit to make sure you help your student figure out how to make it work. But eventually it works just like that. They can take their finger and move the letters around. So you set it up and get it ready, and then they can use it to do whatever they want. And probably once they understand it, they probably can make stuff on there too, because they know this stuff. Is that the answer? Is that the question?
For me, that's great.
Yep. And I think if that seemed too intimidating, you know, it would also be possible for you to put it up, share your screen, and then, you know, for your student to tell you where to put stuff. That, you know, would be
so everything here, you saw there was a little share up in the corner. I would share it with my student, and when they move something, I can see it. When I move something, they can see it. It's magical. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, and now the word patterns. So a word pattern is a consistent letter or sound pattern that students can use to create new words. The column on the left is an example of a word family. By adding different sounds, students can create many words from the at word family, which is what we were just doing. You don't always have to focus on a word family. You can also use patterns to show how phonics principles, for example, the silent E, affect the sounds of vowels. And you can practice substituting different vowel sounds into a word pattern to create new words. And now here's a short video. Now I know the video, when we watch the video, it's a person with cards, and I wish we were doing that, but you can do, you can use this Jamboard to do the cards, but the principle is the same. Okay.
So in our last lesson, we reviewed the sight words that you know, right? Today, I want to show you how you can use the words you know to help you read new words. Are you ready to start?
Yes, but I don't know many words.
That's okay. We can use the patterns and the words that you do know to help us understand these new ones. So I think you'll be surprised actually at how many new words you'll be able to read. We'll get started. There's a word that you know. Can you read that for me?
At.
That's right. Now we're going to put the letter B here. And what sound does this letter make? Correct. We slide it over here. I want you to try and read this word for me. Now what we'll do is you'll take the B sound and the at sound and you're just going to join them, put them together.
Bet.
Exactly right. Good job. Okay, let's try another one. What sound does this letter make?
K.
Right. Can you read that word for me?
Cat.
You got it. Excellent. Let's try one more. What sound does that letter make?
M.
And this word?
Mat.
You're on a roll. What we'll do next is I want you to take this stack of cards and do exactly what we did before. Take that first letter, get the sound, put it together and read the new word.
Sat. Fat. Hat. Rat. Pat.
Perfect. Great work. What did you notice was the same in each of those words?
At.
And what changed?
The first letter.
That's exactly right. The first letter and the first sound is different, right? You can use the strategy with other word patterns too. We'll practice more with it in the next couple of lessons.
Great.
So a student might use this strategy before their student begins reading to introduce words they'll see in the reading passage. This will help the student read the passage more fluently. And after reading, tutors can use other activities to reinforce word patterns. Now we're talking a lot about doing something online or doing something not online. So for example, if you create a document on your computer that you want to use, it could be a passage to read, you can share it on Zoom or WhatsApp. Now, there are exercises that work well if you just hold them up to your computer. For example, if you write at on an index card and then put cards with different letters in front of them to make bat, rat, cat, and you can ask the student to copy down the words as you go. You could ask the student to make cards like that and make their own cards. On the spur of the moment, you can write down a pair of words that your student is confusing or having trouble pronouncing and holding them up to the screen for them to see, and then asking them to make cards also. So you'll both have a little set of cards and you can use them together. Now here's a word slide, which, can't see my camera. Here I am, okay. All right, here's a word slide. So say you're practicing the IGHT, makes a sound of ite, and this is something the student might want to make or have their daughter or son make, right, and practice with at home. But I can hold them up and they can read it. They can make one at home. let's see, that's a word slide. If your student is using a phone for lessons, look at the activity on your phone first to make sure it's large enough or clear enough. That's true for any activities. For example, that learning chocolate is a little bit different on a phone, so you'd have to check it out first and figure out how it works before, if the student isn't that tech savvy, of course they might be able to figure it out faster than you, which is what happens to me. For these or any other activities, you also could make the item and you could mail it to your student, or you could do a parking lot drop off with your student.
Right. So, if you were going to use it once for 5 minutes, that might seem excessive, but if you find something that's really working well with your student, you might want to make sure that you can get one into their hands. Here are some other things that you can use online. They're traditional things that we've used in person with students, but they're easy to hold up to the camera for your student to see. There are a lot of things that wheels can be used for. The first example is adding word endings. So you can take a jump and make it either jumps or jumping, thinks or thinking, and so forth. You can make the center circle prefixes, and the outer circle words you can add a prefix to. So pre would be in the middle, and then you'd have a lot of different things that you can put pre in front of around the outside. And this is just, you can probably see, that's just a little brass brad in the middle there. So it's easy to make, and to be honest, I meant to make one for tonight to show you online, and I completely forgot. You can make a wheel teaching word families. The inner circle is a single letter. Let's say it's an M. And the outer circle has, oops, see, I'm excited again. The outer circle has at or all or ite, or use it for compound words or homonyms. You could have one with homonyms. So you have here, H-E-R-E, matching with here, H-E-A-R, and then you can have interesting conversations about how they sound the same, but have different meanings. Bend cards are really easy to make, and they work really well. So this is the way the word build looks, and that's one. It's really useful if a student can make that a sight word. But then lo and behold, you can fold out the missing piece that was folded behind and turn it into building. And you can do that for suffixes. You could also do that the other way around for prefixes. There are, you can make contraction puzzles, and here are all different kinds of, oh yeah, this one is the homonyms, the words that sound the same but have different meanings that I was talking about. There's another great and very simple technique multisensory technique you can use, and that's to use texture. And if you're a purely visual person, this might not make immediate sense to you, but it has helped a lot of students. So if you have a beginning student who is learning the shapes and sounds of letters, ask your student to write a given letter of the alphabet or a sight word, it could be, that you're trying to teach, on paper, or you can write it yourself and hold it up to the camera for them to look at, and then ask them to trace the letter or word. In this case, it would be to copy it on something with some texture. It could be on a concrete block wall. It could be on sandpaper. It could be on carpet. It could be on, if they're wearing denim jeans, on some rough fabric, or they could use the sensitive skin of their inner arm to write the letter B, or the word boy. That's a good word to learn as a sight word. And that can be helpful to a lot of students because it impresses the word or the letter with its sound upon them through various senses. They're hearing it, they're writing it, they're probably not actually, while they're watching their finger, they're seeing it and they're feeling it through their fingers. Let's see, don't forget old-fashioned flashcards. We keep mentioning them, but flashcards really work. There's a reason why they've been around forever, and you can make them for your student to teach, spelling, the sounds of letters, all kinds of things, or you can ask your student to make their own. They can buy a bundle of flashcards or of index cards very inexpensively at the dollar store or someplace like that. So, using word parts to decode words involves a variety of things. As students advance, recognizing these pieces of words, in, side, sun, helps them decode longer, more complex words that they are little parts of. Understanding root words, prefixes, suffixes, compound words, and the difference between plurals and possessives also helps with word meanings. This supports both their vocabulary development and their comprehension. You can use many of the hands-on methods we just looked at to work on these word parts.
Learning how to break words into syllables can be very helpful in learning to decode words and how to spell words. First, a student must learn how many syllables are in the words, and you can show them how to do this by clapping the syllables, tapping the table, or putting your chin in your hand and elbow on the table and feeling your chin drop with each syllable. Try it. And put your hand under here and put your elbow on the table. And now say the word kangaroo. Kangaroo. And you can feel the three syllables. Practice hearing the number of syllables with your student. There are different types of syllables as shown on this slide. We'll focus on the first three. They're very consistent, and we'll show you more about them on the next slide. Syllables are taught in many of the published materials. These three syllable types are especially helpful to understand because the vowel sounds in them are 99% reliable, and there are some simple ways to teach them. This teaching technique is useful for basic literacy students or ESL students with enough vocabulary to understand your explanation. Closed syllables have a vowel consonant pattern. A closed syllable is when a vowel is followed by one or more consonants. 99% of the time, the vowel is in a closed syllable is short. One way to explain this to your student, the consonant to the right of the vowel is like a closed door or a gate closing in the vowel. So it's closed. The T is closing in the vowel. That's a closed, wet. And it's a short vowel. Open syllables have a consonant vowel pattern. A syllable is open if one vowel is at the end. So there's the closed one. Now there's the open one. All right. There's no closing consonant. So 99% of the time, the vowel sound in an open syllable is long. The door or the gate is open. So it's closed and open. So we, be, me, all going to be a long E. For closed and open syllables, the act of opening and closing the door to see the open and closed syllable can be a great memory device for your student, as in I and we and siren and bonus and baby. And then vowel, consonant, E syllables end with a silent E. The vowel before the consonant is long. There must be only one consonant between the vowel and the E, and this type of syllable is found at the end of words. The memory clue for this is when E is at the end of the word following a consonant, count back 3 letters, including the E. And if the third letter is a vowel, it will have its long sound. With a flap, and you want to do a short sound, mat, and then the silent E, mate. So something like this, right? It's very, very easy to make. A student can make it and easily, or you can, so I think the student would probably have somebody in the family make it, maybe. That's what's happened with my ladies, because it's become kind of a family event. Remember, you can make these teaching aids and use them virtually by holding them up to your camera for the students to watch and read as you manipulate them. The students won't have the advantage of doing the action, but these are still great visuals to help them remember, and of course they can make it. Also, your last English spelling or grammar class was probably a long time ago. Don't worry about remembering rules, even these simple ones. Your teacher guides that are attached to the books that you'll be using will spell it all out for you.
Okay, we've already mentioned sight words several times. They're words that you immediately recognize and understand as a complete unit, not as something you have to sound out. So as a reader, you use the shape of the words, the length, the specific letter combinations, or other clues to recognize these words. And we do it automatically. It's been a long time since we learned these words. These are examples of frequently used sight words your students should learn early on if they don't know them already. They're on the slide. They, you, here, there, is, are. And some words can't be sound out phonetically. And those are good words to learn as sight words. I already mentioned was. Cough is another one. No way they're going to be able to sound that out. And they really have to be taught as sight words. Teach sight words from a passage before your student reads it by writing them down, reading them to the student, and then having the student read the words. Flashcards are one of the best ways to practice sight words after they've read the passage containing them. You might spend a little time working on sight words in each lesson, or you could wait for several lessons and use words that you've used in the last several to practice sight word recognition, let's say every 2 or 3 meetings. It's a tangible measure. If you're using cards with sight words on them, flashcards, it's a tangible measure of progress when your student can see the pile of sight words that they know growing. Anything you can do to help your student understand, for them, often their progress feels painfully slow. And anything, even if they're going quickly, they won't think they're going quickly enough. And anything you can do to emphasize how much they've learned already is really great. Let's see, what's next? Oh, context clues. Okay, using context is a really important skill that helps a reader. It won't get them through everything, but it can really help a reader decode words. You can use clues from the surrounding words when you're reading. You can anticipate what words you're likely to see, so then you can recognize a word more easily, even if you need to sound it out a little bit. Okay, real quick, could I have a volunteer to read the first sentence, inserting a likely word into it? Just whoever shouts it out first.
Vegetables.
Okay, so read the sentence, please.
Cindy wants to grow vegetables in her garden.
Excellent. Very good. Now, the second one is a little tricky. Could I have a volunteer to read the second sentence on the slide, inserting words that might belong in the blanks? Whoever gets it first, unmute yourself and speak up.
With the cost of vegetables going higher, people are trying to grow their own.
Excellent. Very good. Of course, to use context clues effectively, students have to recognize and understand enough of the other words in the sentence in order to help them with the words they don't know. This is what always happens. I'm sorry, when I use my laptop, it doesn't. I'll use it next time. So a close activity, well, that's just a fancy name for filling in the blanks. It's an exercise in using context to help the student practice decoding words correctly. So this slide shows 2 examples. The first is something you might use for a beginning reader. Notice that the 2 choices of words are very close to the blank that you're asking them to fill in. The second one is more complicated. They have to choose from the list of words on the right. The first one is an illustration of words with a silent E, what the silent E does. The second one is a good vocabulary exercise and would be used with a somewhat higher level student. The student has to be able to read the rest of the sentence to guess what word might belong, and then they can check the box. They can do this, I'm sure they can do this on Jamboard are learning chocolate, right, Charmy?
Yes.
Or you can do it orally together online. So strategic decoding. This is just a sort of a summary of all the things that we've been looking at and the order in which a student, any reader, might be using them in order to figure out a word that that person doesn't know. So the first thing we're all likely to do if we run into a word we don't know is to use the context and maybe some visual clues, like, you know, whether it's got a lot of tall letters or a lot of vowels in a row or whatever, to guess what the word is. The second thing that a reader can do, that you do when you're reading and that your student can be encouraged to do, is ask the student to sound the word out more carefully and see if it matches a word that they know, and see whether when they sound it out, their guess from the context was correct. If they're still having trouble, they could try different vowel sounds, because we know that English vowels are very strange. And so if they've don't recognize a word that has a long E, encourage them to see what it would sound like if it had a short E, for example. If the student is still having a lot of trouble, ask them to think of a word that makes sense in the rest of the sentence. They can write that word down and they can look it up later, or you can go over it later. But the student can write down the word that they think perhaps would fit there, and then go back and check it after the whole passage is read. So good readers, I mean, again, you go through all these steps without even thinking about it. That way you don't disrupt your reading fluency. It's not any fun to read. It's terribly laborious if you don't have a strategy for attacking words that you don't know. And it's a good idea to introduce this process to your student after they've read a passage. Practice it in multiple lessons after reading. When they can use this process confidently, they will start to do it automatically, and they will start to apply it on their own as they read.
So now what? We looked at Jamboard already, and then one other thing, we don't have time to show it, but I think this weekend, when you need something to do, look at Quizlet.com. It's a gold standard online of flashcards and game and test, and it's really interesting.
And it's good for any subject. I mean, you might find, you know, botany, maybe you want to learn more botanical terms. Although Charmy pointed out to me that Quizlet is a collection of quizzes made by people who contribute them. And so if you're going to use one with a student, you maybe want to check it over first to make sure that it's accurate before you use it.
Right, or make your own. But it's easy to figure out.